Hi, it's your girl. I'm back. And Zenobia, you're joining us already. Hi, honey. Thank you so much, Zenobia, for joining us. This is February, and it is known as the Love Month. You all see I have my red on. It is the Love Month. And of course, as a nutritionist and a coach, I'm always going to have a challenge for you to help you to eat better, to feel better. My channel is Eat Emotionally Well, and the whole idea and concept behind Eat Emotionally Well is to get you to really take a look at what you're eating and how what you're eating is affecting you emotionally. So again, welcome and thank you so much for joining us. This is February and we have a February challenge. It is really talking about eating like you love yourself. And so we're going to stream live every Friday at 6 p.m. for 1 hour every Friday in the month. Hi, mommy. Hey, mommy. Mommy is joining us too. That is Sandra Smith again on YouTube. And I forgot, I'm also streaming live on my private group, my Pure Trim private group as well. And I'm inviting questions to any of you. And what is so ironic is while I wasn't quite sure what I wanted the topic to be on, I know I wanted to stream for every Friday in February for all of the Fridays for a hashtag February challenge, but I wasn't quite sure what today's topic would have been about. And so, of course, last evening, I decided I'm going to just talk about sugars because I remember doing this, I want to say about 3 years ago when I talked about good, better, best. And I talked about what was some of the good choices and transitional choices and the best choices of sugar. But this stream is going to be a little bit different because we're going to talk about kind of to help you understand what goes on behind the scenes when we are taking regular raw sugar and refining it into white sugar. Also, to get a little deeper look at sugar versus sugar, and just talk about all of the types of sugar out there and help you to understand how which sugar will actually work best for you on your journey. So, first, let me just say this. This show is not meant to particularly for diabetics, persons that have been diagnosed with diabetes, particularly because when it comes to the diagnosis diabetes, you need to get advice from your physician on what is best for you. Sometimes the physician might have taken you off of all sugars. And when we talk today about sugar versus sugars, yes, they are still sugars. I am talking to the persons that are not diagnosed with diabetes, doesn't have any issues in terms of insulin resistance or a complete diagnosis from their doctors as a diabetic. I'm talking to persons that sometimes are on different eating challenges or different weight loss challenges, and they're kind of not sure about what type of sugar they should be using, what actual sugar is better, is white sugar really bad, or just all of these questions. And let me tell you what was funny, right? Let me get my phone out for you. Today, one of my clients that I'm coaching, this is the message that she sent me. She said, "Hi, Shay." She said, one of my colleagues, or she said, my colleagues saw that I purchased maple syrup as a sweetener. And they asked why I'm not using agave since it has less sugar. Um, since agave has less sugar. And so she ended by saying, please provide me with an answer for them. So I knew I was on the right track in terms of a topic for today. So what I said to her right away was, listen, you are on the right track. And she said, I told them. But I also said to her, share this stream today. And once the stream is finished, You definitely want, if they can't join it live at 6 p.m., you share it at the end of it because they're going to learn some valuable information. Because one of the things I can tell you that I've learned is sometimes we are creatures of habits and we would repeat information that we've heard, especially in the world of nutrition, and not necessarily understand the fundamentals behind what it is that we're repeating or in its context, if you will. Now, today, that's one of the things I said. We are doing a February challenge, and this challenge is all about getting you to eat like you love yourself. We're going to stream every Friday in February from 6 to 7, so 1 p.m. And this stream is really to help you to go behind the scene of sugar versus sugar. Now, when we think about it, just off the top of it, I know white sugar, I got some of these sugars back there. White sugar is just one of those sugars that, I've been saying for 2 years now, if I became the prime minister, the president, the whoever, just for a month or even a term, whatever it is, this would be one of the first things I would ban from our country. And I remember getting so much inbox messages. I was actually on a radio station at the time when I said it. And people was like, Shay, is it that serious? And then that sparked me doing the show that I did, Good, Better, Best. And I talked about the quality of sugar. Now, let me say, this stream, we're going to go a little bit deeper. And the reason for that is what I found is over the last 3 years, there are a lot more people now that are getting information of Google, getting information from their nutritionists, from their health professionals, their dietitians, and they're really finding out some of the benefits. But what I also know now is sometimes people are leaning more towards a sweetener or a sugar of choice because of the taste and not necessarily how it affects the glycemic index and not necessarily the nutrient contents. Because believe it or not, there are some sugars that actually have nutrient contents in it. Hi, Patrice. Patrice is also joining us. Thank you so much, Patrice, is joining us today. So now we're going to dive in right here deep into it, but we're going to start with white sugar. And why? Because like I said, if I became prime minister, this would be one of the first things that I ban from the country, actually from the world, really, because this here is just another level. Now, let me tell you what I like about white sugar, right? It has this glycerin type color, and it almost looks like if it has sunlight streaming at it, it'll have like a sparkle type, shimmery. There was a type of material sequence type thing going on there to make it look like the way it looks. It looks almost like snow. It does have a look and appeal. It has that glowy white look. But when we talk about sugar particularly, let's look at what makes white sugar white. Now, what I did was I got a lot of information. And the reason why I got a lot of information is because in addition to me sharing this with you and helping you open up your eyes, I'm just going to give you what I call tidbits. Synovia says BRB. I'm not sure what BRB means, Synovia, but I'm going to give you tidbits. And these tidbits is just going to open up your eyes and to help you to recognize or to help you to just think a little deeper, because that's what this show is all about, sugar versus sugar. So now when it comes to manufacturing sugar, just like this, or what you refer to as sugar table. So the sugar canes, because I go to the market almost every weekend, you would see the sugar canes in its natural form, crushed, and then the juice is extracted. Now that juice that actually came from the sugar cane is really, really good stuff. I actually like it, but I prefer to actually eat the sugar cane myself and work on the chewing aspect while I'm actually enjoying the juice. Now, when it comes to what happens to that juice afterwards is where the kicker is. Now, this juice is processed, heated to crystallize, then it's filtered and bleached with bone char, which results in this sugar pristine white color. Now, I know I said a lot in that sentence. Bleached with bone char, that's right, bleached with bone char. Now, I know you're thinking, Shay, bleach. We kind of understand what bleach means. It's really stripping and removing the color. But I'm using bone char to do this. Now, let me say this. In the USA, There are sugar companies using bone char, and what that is it's derived from cows. Did you say cows, Shay? Yeah, cows. Cows. Awesome. Sugarcane juice is delicious. Yes. I love it. Thank you so much. Alex is joining us from our Pure Trim Facebook group. I'm not sure who else is joining us. Someone else is saying, hey, but thank you so much, Alex, for joining us. Now, when we look at when we look at sugar and we're talking about what gives the sugar this white color, um, it's bleach. It's filtered with bone char, and bone char is derived from cows. That's it. And to make bone char, animal bones are heated at incredibly high temperatures. I mean, incredibly high. Notice I used the word incredibly high. That means really, really high temperatures. And these temperatures are reduced to carbon before using it in refinery. So they're actually taking the bones from cows and heating it and turning it into what they refer to as char. And it's like what we call ash back in the days. You know, if any of y'all on here from back in the days, I know Mommy from back in the days, Zenobia from back in the days, Alex from back in the days, and Patrice is from back in the days. And that's how we used to get this color. So the sugar does it actually contain bone char? Now let me tell you how I like to say tricky those people are, right? The sugar itself doesn't actually contains the bone char, but the particles they do come in contact with it. So you've seen those ingredients label that says this doesn't have peanuts in it, but it's made in a peanut factory. So they use the bone chars to actually in the refining process to get the sugar its white color, but it actually doesn't have the particles in it, but it does come in contact with it. So now I'm going to tell you this. Now, when it comes to cane sugar into table sugar, it is a complicated process. Now, you just see like raw sugar and then you see white sugar. This process to get this like this is extremely complicated and it involves hundreds of organic and inorganic materials to actually get sugar white. Now, one of the first things outside of bone char in the process of getting sugar white, they also use sulfur dioxide, and that is also used to bleach cane sugar. So why is it so important to get cane sugar white? Another thing that I've learned is in the process of bleaching it and changing the color, it also yields more. So obviously it got something to do with money at the bottom line. So Michelle is very informative information. Thank you for sharing with us. Okay, that's Alex. Hi, Alex. Yeah. And so when you think of what actually uses the bleaches the sugar cane, it's sulfur dioxide. So what is sulfur dioxide? It is a chemical. Did I say chemical? It's a chemical that when it's released by the factories using the fusel force to combine in the atmosphere, it also produces acid rain. So if we are using chemicals just to strip the color from the sugar, it gives you food for thought. Because, and in addition to stripping the color, it also stretches. You know, like back in the days when you had one pack of Kool-Aid and you wanted to make more, you kind of stretch it. Santina say, hola, honey. Thank you so much for streaming with us, Santina, today. We're continuing to talk about sugar versus sugar. So when it comes to white sugar, I know we don't often think about it on a deeper level, but that's what this stream is about, to get you to think about white sugar on a deeper level, because there are hundreds of chemical processing just to actually get raw brown sugar into table white sugar. So this is something that when you think, okay, it's just white sugar, it's really not just white sugar. And we talked about the sulfur dioxide. We talk about using the bone char, which is particles from cows. So even when we talk about vegans using sugar, I'm sitting next to them cow bones, honey. And the ash is what causes this sugar to be turned white. Now, they say, there's a lot of information on the internet says none of the particles are actually in it, but it does come into contact with them. And so, yeah, there's some vegans that are really like, oh, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is it comes into contact with it. So when we talk about white sugar, here's another definition. It says refined cane sugar that goes into table sugar. Beside it being a complicated process, it's dissolving by purifying it with phosphoric acid. And what is that again? Think about it. This is another chemical. So phosphoric acid is another chemical used in manufacturing of table sugar. So the question is, why are they using so much chemicals just to get sugar from its natural color to white? When you think about it, what is really the reason? And so when we talk about white sugar, particularly in this stream, sugar versus sugar, white sugar, because in this stream, I'm going to talk not only to help you get a little deeper with the sugar, but I'm also going to talk about my recommendations and why they are my recommendations, because this message that I got from my client earlier today is I recognize that sometimes when people are talking about sugar or changing over their sugar, it might just come as either what's a good price point or what my neighbor's using or what I Google and what came up first. We just switch over to sugar. So this stream is all about helping you to look at sugars deeply and to get you to make a choice on what's the best sugar for you. Now, remember I said earlier, we're talking to what is considered a regular person, not a person that is diagnosed with diabetes or have that has a chronic disease like diabetes. We're not talking about those particular persons. We're just talking about persons like you and me that are free from any diabetic issues, that is considering choosing a sugar to improve how they eat and the quality of their food. But in addition to that is I want you to go a little deeper in the process of how white sugar is made, because I'm telling you, if you have to go through this process of using phosphoric acid, using bone char, sulfur dioxide, all of these known chemicals, which are linked to a lot of negative things that can possibly happen to the body, really, is white sugar really a good choice? Just think about it for a second. Just think about it. When we think of phosphoric acid, right, in the manufacturing of sugar, the ash actually is what they refer to. So the chemicals, right? First of all, the chemicals together and the ash mixed with the chemicals, it's almost like it's burning off the caramel color of the sugar, and then it's leaving the white sugar underneath. And that's what we refer to as table sugar. But in this process, the heating, the degree of heat is extremely high. So even the degree of heat, whatever nutrient may have been in the raw sugar, it's in the color of the sugar, in this natural caramel color. All of that is being removed and stripped. So the only thing that you're left with is an empty calorie food, period, that is known to be a cytotoxin. And so when we think of white sugar will never be on my list of a sugar of choice, because how it's processed and the chemicals that is used to process white sugar. So for me, white sugar is a no, thumbs down. So we can check that off of the list, whether you are considered healthy or not. So now, let me read this question again for those of you that might just be joining me. So the question reads like this. This is from my client. She says, her colleagues saw that she purchased maple syrup as a sweetener, and they said to her, why aren't you using agave since it has less sugar? So the first thing I want to say is this. There's a lot of information out there. There's a lot of information. And the fact is, if you are making a journey of eating healthier, you want to make sure that the information that you get really applies to your journey. And so sometimes we tend to, I call it, get into people's business and have an opinion. And sometimes we don't always have the facts. Plus, in addition to that is, I kind of steal this one from Dr. Kalma. He says, The they say family is the biggest family in the Bahamas because whatever they say, it's usually the gospel. So today we are going to debunk some of the theory behind the they say family, because the fact of the matter is when they say, we don't really know who they are. So first, let's look at um, separating sugars. Now, when we think about the glycemic index, yes, there are some sugars out there that affect the glycemic index more than others. But the glycemic index is really a rating for persons that have been diagnosed with diabetes to make sure that they keep their sugar levels in check. So if you are considered a normal human being, you don't have a diagnosis of diabetes, you may not necessarily be too concerned about the glycemic index of a sugar. Let me tell you why. Because all sugars, every single sugar is going to affect the glycemic index in one way or the other. However, you remember the commercial back then that said, oh, sugar is sugar? See, while sugar is sugar, sugar is not sugar. And so that's why we're talking today about sugar versus sugar. So first, let me say this. Now, when we talked about the glycemic index, remember, all sugars affect the glycemic index. So when it comes to how high it affects the glycemic index or how low it affects it, that's really important if you are diagnosed with diabetes. Now, if you're considered a person that's not diabetic, but you're having issues with insulin resistance, you're having issues with belly fat, you're having issues with sugar cravings, you're having issues with leaning more towards sugary foods. You may even have a candida issue. That's when you have an overgrowth of sugar in the gut, and it's manifesting itself like yeast, sometimes a constant yeast infection. Then you may want to now look at sugar versus sugar, because then in this case, it makes a huge difference. So now the questions are starting to look like, what are the healthiest type of sugars? Like, what are some of the sugar choices? What sugar versus what sugar? And so one of the first thing I want to start with is when we say things like, what are the healthiest type of sugar? That is a broad statement. First of all, sugar could be a healthy food and sugar could be used in a healthy way. Now, again, let me repeat, sugar could be a healthy food and it could be used in a healthy way. It's just so important that understanding that there are some sugar that has a myriad of nutrients when it comes to the micronutrients, and then there's some sugar that is higher in fructose versus glucose, which are both sugars. But I'm going to break that down for you a little bit more. Now, according to the American Heart Association, the maximum amount of added sugar you should eat in a day from men is about 150 calories per day, and that's like about, I think, 37 and a half grams of sugar, which is about 9 tablespoons, and this is a day. And for women, they give us about 25 grams of sugar, which is about 6 tablespoons. Now, this is a tablespoon, okay? Now, I've seen people do this number when they're sweetening a cup of tea like this. Now, y'all know we got big mugs in the Bahamas, right? We don't have the regular teacup. Most of our teacups look like this. So I've seen people do this right here. I'm not going to put that in mine, right? But I've seen people do this right here. 1, 2. And let me tell you what just happened. You just use 1/3 of the sugar that you're supposed to be consuming for the day. Just 1/3. So now y'all know Bahamians, they love tea. And Americans, they love tea too. Hey, listen, and the Brits, we just love tea. Now think about some of the people that cannot have their tea without sugar. Or they have a little tea with their sugar because they have sometimes 4. I invited someone over to my home the other day, and I had not table sugar, I had raw sugar. And I said, how much sugar do you want? He said, just fill up my cup halfway. And I stopped and I was like, did you just say fill your cup up halfway? So you have some people that need to have their tea sweetened. Latonya said, shake a baby. Yes, honey. Thank you so much for joining us. This stream is all about sugar versus sugar. And so we just talked about white sugar. Now we're going to take this even further. Just keep in mind, according to the American Heart Association, women should have 6 teaspoons of sugar a day, and men should have 4 teaspoons of sugar a day. Now, we're going to get into the sugar versus sugar. So one of the first things, if you guys are joining us and you want to do a comparison, let's say you want to do a comparison with honey versus white sugar, or honey versus maple syrup, or maple syrup versus agave, put it in the chat and we'll talk about it, and I'll answer the questions for you, and I'll talk to you about what are some of the benefits versus the other one, and which one actually is a better choice when you talk about including it in your diet, depending on what it is that you're looking for. So you can add that information to the chat, okay? Now, let me say this. I have a couple of comparisons already. One of them is from Latonya, who talked about what her colleagues at work asked her when they saw her buying maple sugar. So I'll start with that one. I'll start with that one for Latonya, and then any of you in the group want to talk about any other sugar that you may have versus the next sugar, you can go ahead and put that up. Now, let me see. One of these in particularly is agave versus maple syrup. Now I'm going to talk to you about that one particularly because that's the one Latonya had a question on. So Latonya, I hope you're listening. I hope you are listening. So first things first, let me get some. Now I don't have agave here right now, but you're going to soon see why. Versus maple syrup. Now, I usually will have a Canadian bought maple syrup because that's normally my choice, because that's where you know to get the best maple syrup from. But I also buy other brands here locally, but I'll try to look for an organic brand. It doesn't matter if it's a grade A or B, because that just means which part of the sap that it actually comes from. The grade B will be darker in color and it has more of that earthy, rich color. The grade A will be lighter in color and it's not as dark in terms of the maple syrup. I usually would get a Canadian maple syrup, and this is one of my favorite. Now, when you think about the maple syrup versus agave, the first thing I want to say to you is the question is what is healthier? Is it agave or is it maple? Now, let's just say this. Agave syrup is sweeter than maple, and it tends to let's say people tend to gravitate to with the agave easily. When you're talking about transitioning from white sugar, the transition in terms of your palate, agave is easier, and plus it's sweeter. Now, most syrup comes from most of the agave syrup comes from either Mexico or South Africa. Now, let me say this first of all. Every whole sugar has a compartment of fructose as well as glucose, and in some cases, even water. Now, before I get to that, let me tell you the difference first between glucose and fructose. So I have some information here that I got offline. I want to read that to you guys, right? This is the difference between glucose and fructose. So glucose and fructose are simple sugars, and they make up the whole monosaccharide. Now your body can absorb what they refer to as glucose easier, right? But fructose takes a harder time to digest, and it can have more of a negative health effect. But experts agree that you should limit your sugar intake regardless of the type of sugar it is. Now remember that fructose and glucose, experts are saying when you take a whole sugar apart, they lean more towards glucose in the sugar and not the fructose, because the fructose is more damaging to your health than glucose. So that's the first thing. Now, let's go down to breaking down the difference between the agave versus the maple syrup. Okay, so you guys listening now, remember what I said. I need you to put a versus, any sugar versus the next sugar, if you have a question, so I can help you with that. So the first thing is agave versus maple syrup. Now we know a lot of the agave comes from Mexico and South Africa, right? Now, guess what? You ready for this? The natural sweetener that can be used to make lower carb treats is agave. It is slightly lower in the glycemic index. It is slightly lower. Now remember the glycemic index refers strictly to a person if they're diabetic. Strictly to them. Now, Latanya says all is. I'm glad you're listening. However, your body is well equipped to handle small amounts of fructose. Why? Because fructose is found in fruit. But because agave syrup is much higher in fructose than plain sugar, that's right, it has a greater potential to cause adverse health effects and to increase belly fat and fatty liver disease. So the first thing I would say is, if I have a client that is on a weight loss journey, one, and over the age of 42, I will never recommend agave or white sugar because the ratio of fructose and glucose in agave is made of mostly fructose, and fructose has the potential to increase belly fat and fatty liver disease. You ready? Okay. Now, here's another thing. Agave nectar beats out table sugar, yes, and even high fructose corn syrup, according to a study back in 2009. I got this information from a Harvard study. Now, it says agave nectar contains little to no antioxidants, no vitamins, and no minerals. But real maple syrup has minerals, including calcium, iron, magnesium, potassium, zinc, copper, and manganese. So now, when it comes to eating emotionally well, one of the things I'm always sharing is making sure that you're not eating empty calories. So if you're looking at a sweetener, right? Agave versus maple syrup. If you are on a protocol where you want to lose weight, one, you are losing weight through eating better and healthier foods. Two, if you're over the age of 43, maple syrup will be the winner, hands down. Hands down. Now, when you go to the glycemic index, if you are diabetic, right? And this is the glycemic index. You can go and then Google it, GI. You look at the glycemic index of agave and you look at the glycemic index of maple syrup. That's if you are diabetic. Today, this stream, we're talking strictly about persons that are non-diabetic because we want you to actually see sugar versus sugar. So we're halfway there, guys. Thank you all so much for staying with me. This stream is important to me because when my client is on a weight loss journey, it's important that I'm teaching them and helping them to understand the food that they're eating, because sometimes people don't always know and they'll give information. And so when you're talking about a sugar that has nutrients in it, a sugar that has less fructose in it, because fructose is known to increase belly fat and fatty liver disease, you definitely want to stay far away from agave and go to maple syrup. Why you find people now I can tell you, I used to be an agave lover. There was a time when I got some information about agave and I thought it was because the agave was refined. Even agave in its raw state, just like raw honey, the maple syrup is a better choice if you are over 40, if you want a sweetener that has more nutrients in it, if you have to lose belly fat, and if you are definitely wanting a sweetener that has more nutritional value. Maple syrup is the winner, hands down. Okay, Santina says maple syrup versus honey. All right, good one. All right, Santina, I'll get you right now. Thank you for that one. Maple syrup versus honey. That's Santina's choice right there. Maple syrup versus honey. All right, Santina. Bam, 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 bam. Okay, so in summary, now I got honey right here. Bam, and I got maple syrup. Bam. Now, first, let me say this. I've heard my clients say things like, I can't get used to the taste of honey. Oh, I prefer raw sugar because I can get used to the taste. Yeah, that's a client calling me and I'm streaming, right? The phone is always going to ring. That's just how it is. I should have just allowed it to ring. Sorry about that, guys. And so she can follow us on the stream today. Thanks so much, Santina, for the question. Okay, so when it comes to the taste, let's get there. People sometimes will lend more towards maple syrup because I find that my clients that I come in contact with, they would talk about just getting used to the taste of honey. Now, let me say this. All honey is not equal. Let's just start there. If you are looking at a honey, first of all, as a better choice, first you want to do raw honey. Let's start with that. Then you want to use a local honey, or if it's an imported honey, you want to make sure that it's unfiltered and wild honey. This is one of the brands I use. That's one of the brands I use right there. It doesn't matter if you use this brand, just make sure it's raw and it's unfiltered. And this one here, you can see that it's from wildflower honey, okay? So just make sure it's raw and unfiltered. That's one of the first things that you want to do. Make sure it has this dark color. Make sure it looks very thick when it comes to pouring. You want to make sure it looks thick like that. If it pours very easy like pancake syrup, then it has other things in it like corn syrup and other sugar. You want to make sure it is thick. Now, when it comes to the nutrient content, let me say this. Hold on, let me just say this. I got to get the sticky off my hand. So I got some information here. Okay, so in summary, honey and maple syrup are healthier options as sweetness instead of refined sugar or agave. Now, honey contains more carbohydrates, proteins, and calories, while maple syrup contains more fats. So right away, let's stop there before I go to the next thing. Yeah, she still doesn't know that I'm streaming. And maple syrup contains more fats. Honey has a higher level of iron, copper, and phosphorus, but maple syrup contains more calcium, potassium, magnesium, and zinc. So let's look at it first there. Now, when you talk about the micronutrients are the vitamins and the minerals. That's the micronutrients. That's all of the iron, the copper, the vitamin, the minerals. So when you think honey, right? If you are, let's say, your iron is low, right? And you have to add a sweetener in there, and you're thinking about the micronutrients, you want to go with honey because it has more levels of iron and phosphorus. If you are perimenopause and you have a deficiency, you have cramping at night times, you find yourself fingertips getting a little bit numb, you find your hormonal levels fluctuating, you want to go with maple syrup because it has more of the potassium, the magnesium, and the zinc. Bingo. Now, when you look at the macronutrients, that's your protein, that's your fats, now, and that's your carbohydrates. Now, when we're thinking about counting calories and we're thinking about lowering our carb content, you want to go with maple syrup. Why? Because honey has more carbohydrates. Yes, it does. However, Honey has more protein. But who uses honey to get their protein? We're only thinking about the carbs in most cases when it comes to it, plus calories. So honey has more calories and carbs than maple syrup. Now, when it comes to the taste, I find people can adjust to maple syrup quicker than honey. Now, I'm going to tell you, I love both of them, but I will rarely use honey at nighttime because it has more calories and it's higher in carbs. I will always, in most cases, almost always go maple syrup, especially if I'm doing a certain type of diet, if I'm doing fasting. But when it comes to the actual taste of the two, I prefer raw honey. Bam. Olivia Wells is just joining us. She says, hi, all. Thank you, Santina, for the maple syrup versus honey. This stream really is all about sugar versus sugar. And this is why it's important that depending on what you are doing, I'm also Santina's coach. I'm also Olivia's coach. I'm also Latonia's coach as well. And so when you see me, I believe that all sugar is not a one fix all, because some of us want sugar outside of having it in a fruit. And so if you have to have any added sugar, I will always recommend the best choice in sugar for you. So Latonia, you can definitely go back to your colleagues and let them know that when it comes to overall nutrients, maple syrup is a healthier choice than agave. And in addition to that, let me also say to you that the calorie content of agave versus, I'm trying to remember what the calorie content is of agave. When it comes to the fructose in agave, agave is 90% fructose. Now remember, fructose is aligned with belly fat and fatty liver disease. And maple syrup is 35% fructose. And so maple syrup has less sugar than agave. So make sure I tell your colleagues that, okay? You're my coach too. Let me know, hon. Best coach. Thank you, Santina. Thank you so much. So now we're going to talk about some other choices. We got 15 minutes, so we're winding down. If you guys have any other questions, put it in the chat. Please make sure to, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to this channel. If you want to share the stream, make sure you tell them to subscribe, because this is the month of February. This is the love month. We're doing a February challenge. And every Friday at 6 o'clock, I'm going to stream for 1 hour. And we're going to be talking about eating to love yourself. And the whole idea behind this February challenge is I want to break down a lot of the things that we're eating. And so I say that eat like you love yourself. This is the love month, and that's our February challenge. So it's all about sugar versus sugar. So when we look at honey, agave, maple syrup, there is a lot of questions out there, but this stream is all about telling you the best choice when it comes to sugars, and depending on the plan that you're on when it comes to sugars. Definitely white sugar is a no-no. And this is why I make a lot of my sweets that I eat, because I can put the sugar in it. I was at Latonia's house this week on Tuesday, and we made some delicious homemade chocolate. She said Bounty happens to be one of her favorite commercial chocolate. So I made some homemade chocolate for her. She is agreed to have one of them a day. That was her first time. She said she hated dark chocolate. She loves milk chocolate. I told her today we're going to do dark chocolate. She tried it and loved it. So listen, just always keep an open mind when it comes to using better sugars, because believe it or not, they will also help to change your taste buds. Now, when it comes to natural sweeteners, there's another one that I use as well, and this is called Yukon sugar. This is a syrup just like honey and agave. This is another type of sweetener that takes some getting used to, especially if you are on white sugar. This does take some getting used to, but let me tell you what I like about this. Now, earlier in the stream, I talked about this stream was particularly for persons that are not diabetic. Now, if you are diabetic and you are really thinking about transitioning to a better sugar that has nutrients in it when it comes to the micronutrients, this is a much better choice because it is good for you, and you always want to look at a sugar that actually has micronutrients in it and it's not an empty calorie. Agave just happens to be an empty calorie sweetener. And so I find myself running away a lot from agave. On Google, you can look for something called www.naturalnews. It talks about phosphoric acid, and it talks about some of the ways that white sugar is made and the chemicals and how dangerous the chemicals are for you. When we started this stream, that's one of the things I talked about. I talked about the process of white sugar and what makes white sugar white and all of the chemicals that they use in white sugar. Now, even when you look at agave again, agave is right up there with table sugar and corn syrup when it comes to the percentage of fructose. So if you want to lower your fructose and you're staying away from white sugar, you need to stay away from corn syrup and agave because the same percentage of fructose, which is linked to belly fat and fatty liver disease, plus it's an empty calorie sweetener, you want to stay away from agave even when it's raw. Now, when you look at agave of a transitional choice, because I've transitioned a very, very long time ago, I no longer use agave. It is a transitional sweetener. It is. It really is. But when you talk about the overall choice and the better choice by all meals, maple syrup wins that hands down. Okay, so do we have any questions? We have 10 minutes left in the stream before 7 o'clock. Just want to find out if anyone have any questions about the agave, about the honey, about the maple syrup, about streaming next week, or even if you have a topic that you want me to talk about for next week, because this topic, believe it or not, I just came up with it last night, and apparently this was the perfect topic for Latonya because some of her colleagues had just reached out to her and asked her, why aren't you using agave? So on this stream, every Friday in the month of February, so we have 3 more Fridays, we're going to stream. And the topic is really eat like you love yourself because February is the known month of love. We're going to be talking about anything that you eat and diving in deeper into it to really show you that whether you are loving yourself by the choices that you're making. And this stream really is about sugar versus sugar. So I want to say this. When we look at sugar now, if we are on a health journey, if we are on a weight loss journey, you definitely want to consider the sugar that you are using. Now, there are some eating plans that actually requires you not to have sugar at all, even from a fruit stand. I have a podcast right available on my channel actually talking about the no sugar diet. And this is when you don't have any added sugar in that. Sometimes this is the type of diet or eating protocol that I would put my client on where they're not having any sugar at all. And you can do these different protocols ever so often. I don't like a client to stay on the same type of eating protocol because if they're on a journey for 6 months or a year, we kind of switch it up. And while in switching it up, you get the opportunity to transition with your taste buds to kind of adapt to getting used to the no sugar idea. But if you are on a weight loss journey, one, and if you are 40, two, the body does react differently to a quality sugar when you're older, especially as it relates to that glycemic index. You definitely want to choose the best and the sugar that has the most nutrient and to make sure that this sugar is not an empty calorie sugar like agave. Latonya said, you said that glucose is digested easier than fructose. Yes, especially when it comes to the gut. There is information. What happens is when the body is digesting sugar, the body needs to use the liver particularly to digest the sugar because it turns it into fat. And The sugar, all the sugars has a compound makeup of glucose as well as fructose. However, when you find a sugar or a fruit in its natural state have a balance of glucose and fructose, that is a better choice. But when you find the sugar has a higher content of fructose and a lower content of glucose, then that sugar is not the best quality kind of sugar for you. So if you want to Google the percentage of fructose and glucose in your sugar choice, that will also help you as well to know the difference. And so when we talked earlier, that's one of the reasons why agave is not a better choice. And it's more like an empty calorie sweetener because it's higher in fructose. And if you are someone that wants to cleanse your liver, if you're someone that has a lot of your weight around the midsection, you want to stay away from agave. You just want, because it's empty calories and 90% of agave is fructose. So you definitely want to stay away from that. Thank you so much for the question, Latonya. Is there any other questions in there? We have about 5 minutes before we leave. Remember, we're going to stream every Friday from 6 to 7 in the month of February. And in this whole month is to challenge yourself to eat like you love yourself. And what that means is you want to look at the choices. Well, today in this stream, you want to take a deeper dive into the choices of your sugar. It is important that you understand how the sugar is processed, where the sugar comes from, and if there's the processing, the refining process of the sugar is what makes it bad for you. When you think about, the levels of fructose versus glucose, that's how you want to determine whether sugar is good for you or better for you or a better choice. When you look at peaches, right? Peaches or apricots, this is a fruit, but peaches and apricot naturally have fructose because it's a fruit sugar and glucose. But the balance of glucose and fructose in a fruit like an apricot or a peach is almost equal. So even when you look at fruits, you want to look at fruits that actually have a balance of the fructose and the glucose. Um, Also, in addition to that, too, is there are some sugars that I would recommend if you like. When I talked about, I use honey as well as maple syrup as well as Yukon. When you think about these particular sugars, there are other sugars like I call them keto sugars like stevia. Stevia is a keto sugar. That is also a much better choice. But again, stevia is one of those sugars that a lot of my clients have to get used to the taste. I love stevia now. I've gotten used to the taste. There's another one called xylitol. That's also a sugar alcohol. If you are on a diet like or eating a keto lifestyle where you're eating high fat, you can use something like xylitol or erythritol. That's also another low caloric sweetener, as well as stevia. Truvia is another brand out there, and I think that's Truvia is just a combination of erythritol and stevia. These are other types of alcohol sugar that you can use from time to time. They have a lot of prebiotics in it, so you want to make sure that they could kind of from using them in the very beginning could kind of give you a little bit of diarrhea. So you want to transition into these type of sugars a lot more slower. Stevia is one of those sugars that is always my best choice when you talk about wanting to transition of as much sugar as you would normally use. Stevia is always one of the better choices. But in between that, you have other choices like raw unfiltered honey, maple syrup. My choice is always the Canadian maple syrup. You can get imported maple syrup from other places, but one of my choices, of course, two of my daughters are in Canada, and it does taste different. The Canadian maple syrup. So that's one of my favorite and go-to choices too. The Yukon or Yukon. Some people say Yukon. Some people say Yukon. Syrup is another good choice. The stevia, like I said, I'm drinking my tea tonight with a little bit of maple syrup because I usually don't do honey at nighttime. But The whole idea for this stream is to get you to look deeper at sugar versus sugar and understanding that the sugar that you choose to use has to work for you. And in addition to that is you want to make sure that when you look at a sweetener, you tie your sweetener into not just what the macronutrients are, but also the micronutrients, and that's your vitamins and your minerals. And that is a very, very important factor when you're choosing sugar that actually works for you. And so this stream was all about sugar versus sugar. I hope you guys learned some stuff. Santina, thank you for your question. Olivia, thank you for yours as well. Latonia, you go back in the office and you tell them, my nutritionist said, and I'm going to be right there to back you. Alex, thank you for joining us. Patrice, thank you for joining us. Also, my mommy, and Zenobia, thank you so much for joining us today. Remember, we're going to stream for 1 hour every Friday. I'm challenging you for the month of February to eat like you love yourself. And I will let you know in the beginning of this week coming here what our next topic will be on Eat Like You Love Yourself for next week. So again, make sure you share this video because I'm sure you could find someone in your office that wants to dive in deeper into sugar versus sugar. But at the top of this stream, I just want to remind you again that white sugar, because of how it is processed and refined and all the chemicals that are used, I don't recommend white sugar in any case. As a matter of fact, white sugar is on the drop down list. So thank you so much again for joining me on this live stream. I had a wonderful time. Remember, February is the month to eat like you love yourself. Hashtag February challenge. And remember, this channel is all about getting you to connect with the food that you're eating, connect with the emotional side, and not getting you just only to release your weight, but to keep your weight off. There go my client again calling me, and I'm on a live stream. Katie, I'm on a live stream, but I'm about to end. Latanya, thank you so much. Yes, 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 to send the info now. Please send the information again. I'll see you guys next week, Friday at 6 p.m. the same time, same place, right here on YouTube, talking about Eat Like You Love Yourself. This is Shay, nutritionist and coach, signing out. I'll see you next week. And remember, February is the month of love. So challenge yourself to eat like you love yourself. See you guys.